Before I begin today's story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced a moment so small, so ordinary, that most people would probably forget it within minutes? And yet, for some strange reason, that tiny moment stays with you. Not because something dramatic happened, not because it changed your life overnight, but because it quietly settled somewhere in your memory. And every now and then it comes back to remind you of something important. Those are the kinds of stories I love telling here. Stories that begin in the most ordinary ways. Quiet neighborhoods, everyday routines, simple conversations, but somehow end up leaving a deeper impression than we expected. The kind of stories that might seem small at first, but later, when you're lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, your mind drifts back to them. And suddenly you realize, that moment meant more than you thought. So if you enjoy stories about everyday life, human connections, and the strange little moments that shape how we see the world, take a second and subscribe to the channel. Because the truth is, life is full of these quiet, unforgettable moments, and here we talk about them. Now let me tell you about one of mine. My name is Claire Matthews. I'm 33 years old, and for the past 6 years I've lived in a quiet neighborhood in Springfield, Illinois. It's the kind of place people imagine when they think about a peaceful American town. Tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, mailboxes that look like they belong in a movie about suburban life. Everything here moves slowly, predictably. On Saturday mornings you can hear lawnmowers humming up and down the street, like some kind of neighborhood orchestra. Neighbors wave to each other while walking their dogs, even if they can't quite remember each other's names. Kids ride their bikes in loose circles until the sun starts dipping below the houses, and someone's mother calls them home for dinner. Nothing here feels rushed. Nothing feels chaotic. And after years of living in louder places, I had grown to love that calm rhythm more than I ever expected. I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for almost 10 years. 10 years of shared mornings, shared groceries, shared bills, shared jokes that no one else would understand, and sometimes shared silence. Our relationship was never the kind you see in movies. There were no dramatic arguments in the rain, no sweeping romantic gestures at airports, no grand speeches about love. Instead, our marriage was something quieter, something steadier, something built on small daily habits. Morning coffee together in the kitchen while sunlight spilled across the counter. Quick check-ins during the day through simple texts like, "Did you remember to grab milk?" Evenings spent cooking dinner while talking about completely ordinary things, work stories, strange news headlines, or what show we should watch before bed. Some people might look at that kind of life and call it boring, but from the inside, it felt like home. Most days followed the same comfortable rhythm. I worked part-time at the local library, a place so calm that the biggest crisis of the week was usually someone returning a book 3 days late. Sometimes people apologized as if they had committed a terrible crime. I would smile, scan the book, and tell them it was completely fine. Libraries have a way of slowing time down. Between the quiet aisles, the soft turning of pages, and the low hum of the air conditioning, hours could pass without you noticing. And I liked that. After work, I would drive home, where Daniel usually arrived not long after. Dinner was almost always around 6. Nothing fancy. Pasta, roasted vegetables, grilled chicken. Simple meals that filled the house with familiar smells. Sometimes we would take a walk afterward if the weather was nice. Other nights we would collapse onto the couch and watch half an episode of a show before both of us got too tired to finish it. Then bed. Then another day. At one point in my life I thought this predictable routine was all there was to adulthood. Just a long series of manageable days stacked neatly on top of each other. But life has a funny way of reminding you that even the calmest routines can be interrupted by the smallest, most unexpected moments. The day it happened was a warm afternoon near the end of summer. The kind of day where the air feels soft and golden rather than heavy with heat. Somewhere nearby, someone had just cut their grass, and the faint smell drifted through the open kitchen window. Music was playing quietly from my phone, something acoustic and mellow that fit perfectly with the slow pace of the afternoon. I was cooking dinner. Not just an ordinary dinner. This time I was actually trying. My friend Megan was coming over, and Megan had a reputation for being an incredible cook. Every meal she made somehow looked like it belonged in a magazine. Perfectly plated. Perfectly seasoned. Perfectly everything. And although she never judged anyone else's cooking, I still felt a small, completely unnecessary pressure to impress her. So there I was in the kitchen, moving from counter to stove and back again, checking recipes on my phone and tasting sauces like I was competing in some kind of quiet cooking show. Earlier that day, Daniel had mentioned something casually while heading out to the backyard. "Oh, by the way," he said, grabbing a pair of work gloves, "Ethan might stop by later." "Ethan?" I asked. "Yeah. From work. He borrowed my screwdriver last week." "Right." I had met Ethan a few times before. He worked with Daniel at a small construction company. Tall. Easygoing. Always polite. The kind of person who seemed naturally relaxed, like nothing in the world could really stress him out. But we weren't close. He was just someone who occasionally appeared at backyard barbecues or quick visits to return borrowed tools. So when Daniel said Ethan might stop by, I didn't think much about it. People in our neighborhood dropped by all the time. Sometimes they knocked. Sometimes they didn't. Familiarity often replaced formality. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, the house slowly slipped into what I call pre-guest chaos. You know that strange phase before someone comes over when suddenly everything feels slightly out of place? I wiped the counters for the third time, rearranged the candles on the table, folded a towel that probably didn't need folding. At one point I even adjusted the position of a salt shaker by a few inches, then laughed at myself for caring so much. Eventually I began setting the dining table. Plates, napkins, glasses, everything neatly arranged. And just when I thought I was finished, I suddenly remembered something. The bread rolls. I had bought them earlier and tucked them away in the pantry. So I walked across the kitchen, opened the pantry door, and crouched down to grab the basket from the bottom shelf. The wooden floor creaked softly under my weight. I was humming along to the music without even realizing it. For a moment, everything felt completely ordinary. Calm, quiet, peaceful. And then I heard something. Footsteps. Right behind me. Closer than I expected. I turned around quickly. My heart jumped for a second. Standing there, just a step away from me, was Ethan. He was holding the screwdriver Daniel had lent him. For a brief moment we both froze. Not dramatically. Not awkwardly. Just that tiny pause when two people suddenly realize they're standing much closer than either of them expected. "Oh, sorry, Claire," he said, giving a small laugh. "Didn't mean to sneak up on you." I let out a short laugh too, though mine sounded thinner than I intended. "I didn't even hear you come in," I said. "Daniel let me through the side door," he explained. Of course he did. Daniel was probably in the backyard tending to the small vegetable garden he had been obsessing over all summer. There was something oddly human about that moment. Not dramatic. Just that subtle awareness that happens when two people accidentally share a small space. Like when you step into an elevator with someone you don't know. Both of you instinctively adjust your posture, creating invisible boundaries without saying a word. It's a strange little dance of personal space. I stood up and placed the bread basket on the counter. "Big dinner tonight," I said casually, trying to impress my friend Megan. "Oh yeah," Ethan said with a grin. "What are you making?" And just like that, the moment returned to normal. We talked about food for maybe a minute. Recipes. Cooking disasters. Nothing important. Nothing memorable. Just ordinary conversation. Then Daniel walked into the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hey, you made it," he said to Ethan. And the moment disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Here's the strange thing. That interaction lasted maybe 10 seconds. If someone had asked me later that night what happened that day, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it at all. And yet, for some reason, that tiny moment stayed in my mind. Not because of Ethan. Not because of attraction. Not because of guilt. But because it broke the rhythm of my day. It was like someone tapping lightly on your shoulder when you're lost in thought. A reminder that life isn't always just a straight line of planned events. Sometimes something as small as turning around unexpectedly can make you pause and notice the present moment. And sometimes, the smallest moments we almost ignore end up teaching us the biggest lessons about life. If this story stayed with you, Don't forget to subscribe for more quiet moments that mean more than they seem.